Good morning, ladies and coronavirus germs. This is your ticker update for the 13th, Friday the 13th. Well, we had something I don't think I've ever seen before. We actually had a lock limit up in the futures this morning. I don't believe there is a limit up on trading during the day. There's individual stock limits, but I don't think there is on the actual indices. There is on down. Gee, it's funny about that, right? But, this has been quite a week. We had two lock limit down doubles, which I don't think that's ever happened even once before in the markets. And then this morning we had a lock limit up on the futures. As I record this, the Dow is up 760 points. The SPOOs are up 111, which is off 0.5% or so from where they were at the top. Quite an impressive bounce, and not at all surprising. And one of the problems though that you're running into now is that we're starting to see some kind of interesting disconnects in liquidity in a couple of other places. The VIX is trading down substantially from where it was yesterday, but we're starting to see some volatility creep back into VIX while with the index being up so far. That usually doesn't happen all that much, and it's an expectation that this may not hold. Remember, the VIX is the at least this is the claim, is it is the expected percentage change in the S&P over the next forward 1 year. So when the VIX is saying it's 67, what does that tell you about the probability that the stock market is likely to more than double, or it is to crash by 70% over the next 12 months? Needless to say, that sort of a range makes any kind of forward planning essentially impossible. So don't get trapped. This is not a time to be playing with size for obvious reasons. One thing that I do think is interesting is that a decent percentage, about half, third to half of the stupid that was in some of the higher quality debt markets appears to have come off. Now, I'm not sanguine about this for a number of reasons. One of the more important ones being that I still see way too much of this. And yesterday was one of those days that when you see those kinds of moves in areas of the credit markets that are not really subject to liquidity shocks. I expect it in the high yield market. The high yield market is basically gambling. Everybody has looked at it as a stable form of investment because rates have been so low. It's not, never has been, and anybody who thinks that it is has rocks in their head. You're just bonehead stupid treating it that way and trying to trade or invest around that. That's a crazy premise, and you're nuts to do it. But this is what happens in a world of ZERP. For those, and of course, we got another demand from the president this morning, just a couple minutes ago, says the Federal Reserve must finally lower Fed rate to something comparable to their competitors' central banks. Jay Powell and group are putting us at a decided economic and physiological disadvantage. Physiological? Excuse me? Should never have been this way. Also stimulate. Mr. President, would you just shut the fuck up? For real, just... I know you think that there is something fundamentally unfair about the United States having a positive yield when other people don't. But you need to be thinking about this in a different way. Japan, remember, was the first nation to go about doing this zero and then negative interest rate thing, huge quantitative easing. Their central bank went in and bought equities. They own something like 60 or 70% of the stock market at this point. Did this drive the market to new highs? Did it happen? Did it work? No, just bluntly, no, it did not. Those are facts. And I know nobody wants to talk about those facts, but they are facts. It did not work. The Nikkei back in the day peaked at just right around 40,000. Well, today it's trading at less than half of that. And it like everything else, has crashed by 10-15% or thereabouts. But it never saw that number again. All of this so-called stimulus, all of this zero interest rates, all of the, it doesn't work. Now, can you goose the market for a period? Yes, you can. But that's not the question. If you are going to be Mr. Stock Market President, you cannot focus on what happens over the next 6 months. I know. The most important thing is you get reelected. I get that. Okay, I get that. But aren't we supposed to be talking about what's good for the economy as a whole? And incidentally, why is it that we're not drawing comparisons? Although now we're starting to see it in some of the social media folks between this and the swine flu. Okay, which, by the way, remember, it was Black Jesus's pandemic, which nobody said was a pandemic, but it was a pandemic. It got here into the United States. It sickened a huge number of people. It sent a couple 100,000 people over the course of its run, a little over a year, to the hospital. And it killed over 10,000, including something like 1,300 kids. And that's not surprising, okay? But this, I mean, you had another scaremongering thing overnight out of Ohio saying, well, there's probably 100,000 Ohioans that are infected with coronavirus, but we have no way to know because we can't test. We don't have any test kits. Okay. So as I pointed out yesterday and made a big stink about, what are we going to do about the political corruption that led to that situation? Okay. The FDA and remember that this is the CDC. Okay, so the CDC and the FDA, both of which are civil service career people that get in, they have nothing to do with political appointments, because once they're in there, you can't get rid of them. They're government employees, though. Both of them are government employees. This is all part of the civil service bullshit. All right. The FDA sets the standards and the regulatory environment by which people have to follow for drugs and tests and cosmetics and whatever have you in the United States. Okay, and then the CDC produced the protocols. Okay, both of them screwed the pooch. And yet it's, Trump had nothing to do with these guys. When are we going to take this entire section of the federal government, which, by the way, is bigger by far than the elected part, and literally burn it at the stake? Take it out. Zero the funding, remove it, it's gone, it needs to be gone. We have had more scams in this environment than you can shake a stick at. And yet, nobody goes to jail, ever. This is the big mantra right now, is nobody ever goes to jail. That's a huge problem by itself. But then we got to add on to it in this environment, because now it gets people killed. And it's used as by God, it's a hell of an excuse to gin up some kind of faux outrage that is so terrible. The world is going to end if we do not get exactly what we want right now. By God, the world is going to end. You're all going to die. And oh lordy. Excuse me? We're all going to die? Well, I'm not worried about dying. I'm not worried about it all. Why? And we had some truth out of Mr. Doctor, who was outside the White House yesterday, and gave some other ways to do things. All right. And here's the thing that's interesting about this. He spoke one segment of truth. Okay, which I actually kind of liked hearing from him because, that's a guy that actually does have some chops and knows what he's talking about. And it's very hard to discredit somebody like that because he's not full of crap. And he was absolutely right. And he says, look, if you get this big exponential spike, and especially if you get the scaremongering, you drive all these people in the hospitals, it's going to overload the hospital system, and we don't have any way to deal with that. Well, that's absolutely true. All right? What's so terrible about speaking the truth like that? Well, there's nothing terrible about it. In fact, we should be speaking the truth about things like that, and it is the truth. It is absolutely the case. All right? So let's think about this in the context of what this means for society and for our government and for everything else as a whole. We have two groups of people in this country at this point. The polarization has gotten to the point where we are willing to do everything in our power, if you're on the left, to destroy this president, destroy Republicans. You don't care what the collateral damage is. What we're not willing to do is slam the door on the people that have actively put forward an attempt to destroy this country, and that would be China. And now they're actively threatening to do it, threatening to cut off pharmaceuticals. This is not, folks, this is not some random op-ed in a newspaper. This is the official mouthpiece of the Communist Party. These people, you cannot, look, folks, you say what you want about the Washington Compost and PMS, DNC, and whatever. At least ostensibly, they are supposedly free enterprise people who are free to form whatever opinion you want. We're not talking, that doesn't exist in China. It doesn't exist at all for any price. The media in China is officially controlled. And this particular aspect, this particular outlet, if you will, is not only explicitly controlled, they are officially a part of the Communist Party of the nation. That's just the way it is. I don't care if you like it or not. So we have the Communist Party of China that has come out and said, well, we're going to, we need to do this. We need to think about this. All right. There is no purpose to a government that does not first put its borders and its people in front of everything else. No purpose whatsoever. And that's just the way it is. So we have to decide as a people, are we going to tolerate this kind of bullshit? Are we going to tolerate Nancy Pelosi sticking abortion rights and abortion funding into a coronavirus bill? What in the hell does abortion have to do with fighting a virus and public health in this regard? What, can I ask? Is there any connection between these two things whatsoever? No. Other than that Pelosi thinks that she can do that because it has to be passed, supposedly. Or does it? Or does it? Think about this. If the supply lines all go through China, what is passing that going to do? Have you thought about that? What would it actually do? Nothing, right? What would do something? Well, we could go tell the Communist Party of China to go fuck a goat, for one thing. We could tell them that if they try anything like that, number one, we're going to burn all their treasuries. Literally, burn them. $1 billion for every American who dies of coronavirus in the United States, starting today. Since you want to issue threats, we can do that too. We're just going to void them. $1 billion. I don't... Oh, you mean that's going to be like all of them within like the first couple hundred people that die in America? Well, then maybe you guys ought to make sure that we don't have any deaths in America, right? Why don't we give them a nice big financial incentive and serve them a nice big cup of shut the fuck up? Oh, because We don't have anybody in our country who actually gives a shit about America first. No, it's all about politics. It's all about how we can make money off of this and how we can screw Americans in the ass. Well, you go ahead and you go ahead and you play this game, folks. I personally think it's absolutely disgusting, but this is where we are politically. And by the way, if you think Joe Biden has an idea, what Joe Biden and all these other people that are screaming would do is drive traffic substantially into the emergency systems within our medical environment today, would overload it immediately, and then you'd have happen what happened in Italy, what's already happened in Italy. You know how they're doing triage over there? By age. You're 85? Sorry, no hospital bed for you. Yeah. How would you... No death panels, huh? That's not going to happen here in the United States with socialized medicine. Well, actually, yes, it will. And how else are you going to solve that? You have all these huge wings that have all the people that are there, all they do is figure out how to screw you, how to take all your money. Has there been any demand? You're going to get public money. You have to actually show that you're going to serve the public first instead of your quote-unquote shareholders. Of course not. Not any more than the Western states and their governors did anything similar with regards to Spamazon and Microsoft and HP. And woe is Disney after they offshored their entire IT department illegally. By the way, that sort of practice is supposed to be illegal, but nobody goes to jail. Okay? Absolutely nobody goes to jail. Why do we keep doing this? Well, because we hate each other because they vote the wrong way. Isn't that kind of like hating each other because you pray the wrong way? I think it is. And by the way, anyone that thinks that the government is a solution for any of this, how well is that working out for you? Just explain this. How well is that working out? All right? And you know what? I don't agree with much of what people like Matt Gaetz have to say, but he just put a tweet up too, just seconds ago as I'm recording this. President Donald Trump has been proactive in trying to protect the country with national security restrictions on travel, but Democrats are working against him as he's trying to keep America safe. Well, you know what? Matt Gaetz is a blowhard, hyperbole-laden pile of shit. Okay? Remember that this is the same Matt Gaetz who lied to the face of not only myself, but everybody else in a town hall about the bullshit regarding medical antitrust and a bunch of seniors. And when I challenged him on it, along with the case sites in public, he said, I'll get back to you. And he never did. So politicians lie. All right? And that's just the way it is. Like it or not. But where are we going as a people? Because it is ultimately our job in a nation where we are the epitome, we are the structure of all governments exist only with the consent of the governed. We're the people who make that decision. We make that decision every morning, every night, every day. When are we going to make the decision? Are we going to do it at all? Are we ever going to make that decision? Are we ever going to stop it? Are we ever going to say we've had enough of that bullshit? That you will stop this right now? All right. By the way, all this liquidity nonsense and the repos and everything else, that has nothing to do with things in the United States. Isn't the Federal Reserve supposed to be the protector of the American financial system? The payment processor for the American financial system? By the way, the actual purpose of the Federal Reserve, beyond the so-called monetary policy arm, which is just a political load of bullshit, is to clear payments. That is, for people to be able to flow money back and forth. You probably only deal with this a couple of times in your life when you buy or sell a house and people wire money around and things like this. All right, but this goes on every single day. The amount of money that flows through those pipes is staggering. And without it, you'd literally be back to, you'd be back to stagecoaches and the modern day equivalents. People would be driving armored cars around with huge amounts of banknotes in them. And all the processing would be Fedwire is the essential element of the Federal Reserve that has nothing to do with monetary policy, everything to do with keeping the economy actually working. And yet nobody wants to talk about separating these components out and saying, well, this one we actually need, this one not so much. Nobody ever wants to talk about any of these elements, especially during times when things are tough and you got people doing things they shouldn't be doing. Why are they doing it? Because, oh man, we have to protect this company or that company because they did something stupid, like put their entire fucking supply line in a communist nation. Why should we do anything to protect a company that put its entire supply line in a communist nation? Why? Why should we do anything to protect it? Why shouldn't we instead say we will assist those companies that want to destroy firms that put their entire supply line in a communist nation? Yeah, that I could get behind. Borders, language, culture. Yeah. All right. Royal Caribbean wants to hire people to run their, run their ships for $5 a day, and they end up with a rampant infection problem they can't control and end up having to shut down for a month. And oops, we have way too much debt on our balance sheet, and therefore their stock goes to zero and they go into receivership. Aw, such a pity. Well, maybe we should encourage other firms to stand up that don't do things like that. They hire Americans. I know. There's no business model for that. Well, but there would be a business model for that if we weren't subsidizing people to do third world things. Yeah, we can solve these problems. We just don't want to. All right, coronavirus. Not a lot to talk about in coronavirus today. I will say the shutdowns and things that we're seeing in the last day are they're crazy. All right. I get the large crowd gathering stuff. That makes some sense. Is it going to hurt people? Yeah. And are we going to get a recession out of it? Yeah. Boston Marathon was just postponed. The number of people who are going to get screwed in the butt on that is astounding. I mean, everybody's saying, well, how about all those people that train for the marathon? Well, okay, yeah. But you know what? I'm a distance runner, and I'd be pretty pissed off if I put in the, several months. Because it's for me to really, choose to get ready for a half, for example, and then go through the training regime and stuff to actually be prepared to run it. Not saying that I can't do it without that, because I can and I have, but you tend to hate life if you skimp on what you ought to be doing in front of the actual race. The thing is that I look at those things though, and that's going to piss some people off. But the real problem is that you take any of these major events, and all of the hotels and other lodging accommodations typically have like a 3-day minimum stay. And oh, by the way, the reservation is non-refundable and non-cancelable, non-changeable. And that is going to be a serious problem. So now you've got all these people that don't live in Boston, and they're going to get boned twice. They're going to eat their original reservation, and then if they rebook for the new date, they're going to end up having to eat it again. So basically, they're going to pay double to get one time worth of service. There isn't anything you can do about this. All right. I mean, you can't say this is, that the government can stand in and make people do this. That would be ridiculously unjust. I don't see that as being something that is likely to happen, nor do I think it should happen. I think this is one of those luck of the draw, sorry, so sad, have a nice day kind of circumstances. But the economic impact, think about this. On the one hand, you say, well, all those people that lost all their money, that's going to crimp their spending. Okay, how about the guy who was renting out the room? He just got a hell of a windfall. He got paid for something that didn't happen, and all he doesn't have to pay the cleaning people to clean a room that doesn't have anybody in it. Yada. I mean, there's real expense. The electrical power that would otherwise be used doesn't get used. There's real avoided cost. He gets to pocket that money. That's a benefit for him. Now, is it a net plus, a net minus? It's probably a net minus, but one way or another, right? So I think you have to be a little more nuanced about all the screaming here, because I was on Stocks and Jocks this morning, and we were talking about this. For example, one of the examples I made was is McCormick, okay? Because I used to do shows at McCormick, and when I was running MCS, and the amount of money we spent in one of those shows was astounding. All right, and I mean, some of the stuff that we got charged for and some of the things we willingly paid were just flat out ripoffs. Okay, a rental of a power strip, which you had no choice on because it's a union shop in McCormick, $50 for 2 days or 3 days or whatever. $50 to rent a power strip. It's a beat up old piece of crap too, but you want power? Well, okay. I mean, seriously, this is the kind of rape job that they used to serve up on you, and it was an all the time kind of thing, and you did it even though you knew you were getting screwed, but you did it because you were making enough, you're getting enough business out of it as it was worth it. Every single hotel room was ripped off. Okay, every single one was gone during the entire period. Well, guess what? All those hotel rooms that were non-cancelable for things like South by Southwest, those hoteliers are going to keep the money. So there is a downside in the economy to this, but there's also an upside because there is payment without cost for a number of these people, and yet most of this is uninsured. You can't claim it against somebody, so you can't get it back from someone else. So don't look at this as entirely cost without benefit, because it's not true. But is there going to be an economic hit? Yeah, there is. When it comes to the actual virus, I want to expand a little bit on something. I talked about this in Stocks and Jocks as well, and that's that there is some indication, but it's not good enough to call it evidence yet, that some commonly used drugs for high blood pressure may actually potentiate the virus. Now, that would be very bad. What's even worse is that there's also a mechanism of action linked to over-the-counter fever and pain pills, specifically naproxen and ibuprofen. And people tend to use those as an alternative to either aspirin or Tylenol because both aspirin and Tylenol have nasty side effects, gastrointestinal and also potential liver toxicity, respectively. And the others tend to be less, there's less harm potential there. So there's a lot of substitution that goes on and back and forth and kinds of things like this. The problem is there's no science here right now to back up somebody saying, yes, that's definitely the case. There's an indication that it might be true. And this goes back to what I have said about this virus, that if you are at high risk, the longer you can wait before you get it, the better. Don't think for a minute that we're going to actually be able to keep you from getting it long enough that by the time it comes around, there'll be a vaccine. I know everybody and their brother is running scams on vaccines and things. And folks, if somebody comes up with it, God love them, all right? And I'll be the first one to say, all right, fantastic, great work, whatever. History is that there has never been a successful coronavirus vaccine. I just want you to remember this. Keep this in mind. That's the historical context on this. It has never happened. That doesn't mean it won't in the future. It just means today there has never been. All right? And it has to do with coronavirus. All right? Just saying. It just has to do with coronavirus. It's the way they're structured. It's the way their RNA works. It's just the way they are. All right? So what you have to contemplate is that just like seasonal flu, just like a cold, the probability is we will all get it. Some people won't, but probability-wise, we're all going to get it. So if you are not at high risk, so what? If you are at high risk, however, as the science advances, we will learn more about what works and what doesn't to reduce the risk of a bad outcome. And remember, if you have a 15% chance of being killed by this thing because you're at high risk, you're old, you're frail, your pulmonary capacity sucks, and you have something else going on that we're not really sure of, but it turns out that you also have high blood pressure, and your high blood pressure medication potentiates the virus. And if you get that out of the mix, it takes 5% off the morbidity rate or the mortality rate. All right. So now 15% risk of death goes to 10. That's a big change, folks. And yet today, we don't know whether that change would happen. We don't know. We can have suspicions, but we don't know. Taking an action without knowing could actually hurt you, could go the wrong way. So you'd be crazy to do that. But see, this is the problem with acting hastily when you're at high risk. So if you're at high risk, there is great value in delaying your getting the virus, i.e., bug in, get away from people, and stay that way for the time being. Economic impact be damned. If you're not at high risk, well, not so much. Because look, if your odds of having a bad outcome go from 0.5%, any bad outcome, okay, has to do something other than sit at home and be miserable for a few days, goes from 0.5% to 0.4%, you say, well, that's a 20% improvement. Yeah, but 0.5% was vanishingly small in the first place. And by the way, this is one of the scams. This is one of the scams that you have in the medical system in general when it comes to so-called benefit. You will have people tell you, well, if you take this cancer therapy, it improves your survival risk, your rate of survival by 20%. That sounds really big, right? Or even better, it's Dendrion. Hey, man, the mean survival time was up by half. What they didn't tell you was that the original mean survival time was 6 months, and this put 4 on it. Well, wait a minute. So what you're saying is I spent $100,000, I tolerated whatever side effects, and with some drugs, the side effects are not so bad. With others, they're terrible. All right. So I do all these side effects, and what did I get out of this? 4 months? All my hair fell out. I felt like shit. I got radiated. I couldn't do a damn thing because I was basically bedridden for the entire fucking 4 months. And I got 4 months. And then I died anyway. What happened here? Somebody made a lot of money and sold me a false hope. You need to be aware that this kind of thing is very real within the medical world, and it's very real within markets. And it is a serious problem. It's a very, very serious problem. You need to dig into this in a reasonable way and understand that these kinds of things are shoved down people's throats, especially during times of high stress, like, for example, right now. Don't fall for it. It's stupid. It's kind of like making a run on toilet paper. What are the odds that you actually, why would you be short of toilet paper, for Christ's sakes, in a crisis? Toilet paper isn't majority made in China. China, are you serious? Are you worried about running a Charmin? There's at least some logic when there's a hurricane coming on the Florida Gulf Coast, and it might hit here. Okay, there's no, look, when Michael was in the Gulf, there was a small probability. There was never more than about a 10% probability that it was going to come here and get us. But there was a period of time when there was a double-digit, very low double-digit, but double-digit possibility. And the Walmart was stripped of bottled water, and half the canned goods were gone. Okay, I guess I can, a 10% chance that you're going to get plastered. And if you do, it's going to be really bad because there's going to be power. And without power, eventually, the big problem, by the way, isn't that there isn't any water, because there's generators and the water pipes are typically not disrupted. So there's usually water. The problem is the sewer lift pumps stop working. You can't flush the toilet. And if you do, or God forbid, you're lower in elevation and your neighbor does, guess where the shit goes? Yeah. That's a huge issue during events like that around here. But if you don't have a source of potable water, you are in a lot of trouble. And so, for somebody to buy a few cases of bottled water in that situation makes a little bit of sense. But toilet paper for something like this? What are you, crazy? What are you trying to do? You have 10 years worth of TP in your house. What the hell are you going to do with that? Well, I guess you'll eventually use it. At least it isn't perishable. But be aware that in the medical system and among the political people who are trying to take advantage of this, and by the way, that's everybody right now. All right? Look at the Joe Biden stuff that we're hearing. Oh, well, I would have done it. Or Hillary Clinton. She was out with her little thing yesterday. Yeah, these things that she thinks that should happen. Hillary Clinton. Well, gee, how wonderful that is. You know what? Anybody that listens to Hillary Clinton about anything with what she would have done in this regard has rocks in their head. Okay? And the reality is that essentially everything that these people have done on both sides of the aisle for the last 20 to 30 years has been to push data and manufacturing through a communist country that intentionally lied and seeded this into the United States along with the rest of the world through its lies. And we now know that is a fact. My original analysis on this said they had to know about this in October. We now know from the DNA sequencing that's been done in Italy that Italy had cases in their country going back into November, which means I'm right. Because it can't happen instantly. And oh, by the way, that part of Italy has a bunch of travel between itself and China. It's a very wealthy part of the country. Just like the West Coast, just like Washington State and all those multinational firms that have all these employees are going back and forth. Where? To China. And gee, where do we have the hot spot? Where's most of this coming from now? Travel. There you go. Anyway, that's what I got for today, folks. Coronavirus, like I said, if you're high risk, you ought to be bugged in already. Not because you won't get it, you will, but because you might be able to get some mitigation strategies 3 or 6 months from now that substantially change your mortality risk. And that is worth it. For everybody else, not so much. Have a good one. I'll be with you tomorrow.